All right, everybody. I want to welcome you back to our final presenter of today. This is Brother John T. Roark. He can't be with us. He's got a new baby, so he's got that. He has to look out for the child with the COVID pandemic. So John Roark comes to us from Virginia. He's the host of the Masonic Roundtable, co-author of It's Business Time, and he's a lecturer. So he travels around quite a bit. Brother John Roark is a past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. His love of technology and gadgets led him to start the Masonic Roundtable as a hangout on air. His Masonic interests lean toward the esoteric and philosophical aspects of the fraternity. And again, he lives in Virginia with his wife. He's got 5 cats. No, I'm kidding. 5 kids and 2 cats, Tesla and Edison. What a nerd. Anyway, so what I'm going to do, because I need to make sure that you all can hear him, I'm going to ask John in like 5 seconds, can you tell me what you had for breakfast so I can turn up the volume for everybody?
Breakfast was a good cup of coffee and I think an avocado. So there we go. How's the audio looking today? So far, so good. 1, 2, 3. The internet can hear.
Okay, so the lodge room can hear you just fine. Good. I'm just going to check the audio in the room. I'll give you a thumbs. I'll just come back and say you're good to go. 1 second. You're good to go, John? That's correct. Okay. I hear you now.
Good.
Okay. Go. Oh, you have the floor. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you all very much. I know I'm the last presentation before dinner, and so nothing says, getting people pumped and energy than Masonic data. So anyway, this is something obviously very, for those who know me, very passionate about. But I wanted to take a different look on Masonic membership numbers and really think about how are we at capturing data for the fraternity. So we have a phrase in Virginia that says that items are to be laid up in the archives in the lodge. And laid up in the archives emotes a lot of, well, it's laid up and it's put there and it's closed, it's got spider webs, right, never to be seen again. And so I wanted to take apart and demonstrate how hard it is to get any sort of information about the fraternity. I mean, so if you're an outsider trying to do research, it's near impossible. And then what does that mean for us as members of the fraternity on what are we going to do with this data in the next couple of years? And so without further ado, let's see if my slides will advance. Yes. Brethren, we have a problem. I want to put it right in your face. If you've seen in my earlier presentations, Freemasonry is dead at 2040, right? I've seen lots of platitudes. I've seen lots of yeah, but not in my case. If nothing changes, then the Masonic fraternity is gone as we know it. It will have to evolve or be reborn in some fashion. But as we know it, the fraternity will be dead in 2040. So that's only 20 years from now, right? That's certainly within the grasp of some of us who are still alive. Like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do with this fraternity after 2040? Because we've really tried lots of different things. My personal opinion is we haven't tried hard enough to really take a corporate view and to really try to figure out what's with our membership numbers. But in fact, I just heard a webinar from Minnesota, and their Grand Line had looked at some of the same numbers. They used some of my sources, they used some other sources, and they even looked at in their internal sources and saw that that 50% of their candidates in the last 5 years never completed their degrees. So half of the candidates that came through dropped out. plain out and dropped out. So if we, that's a huge issue, because you basically need to have 2 to 1, right? For every 2 people coming in, you're actually going to get 1 Master Mason out of them. And then they have the rest of their Masonic life to be an active member of the craft. So we got this balance here of what are we going to do between now and 2040, between now and the next 19 and a half years, because the clock's counting, that's going to move us forward and carry the legacy. This is really what this conversation is about, the legacy of the fraternity going forward. So what do I mean by legacy of the fraternity? We have lots of shiny widgets and bobs and, of course, 1,000 lapel pins. But we really need to think about what are the real reason, the meat behind the fraternity and why we care so much about it. So I want to tell you a story. Well, one day, a father was sorting through some old boxes that they were going through, and his son was helping. And the son opened one up that had, like a picture here, a crystal gavel with a rose inside. And the son looked at the father and asked, "Whose is this?" The father replied, "Well, it's actually your mother's. So why don't you take it to her? It's hers, and she would probably like it back. So why don't you ask her what it's all about?" Not thinking much about it, the son puts it to the side, and then actually later that month sees it again and says, "You know what? I really need to go ask mom about this." So he drives on over, visits his mom. Upon visiting his mother, he shows her the box, and her eyes just light up. And in surprise asks, "Well, where did you get this?" The son tells her how he and his father were going through some old boxes and came across it. And he asked her what it was. She said, "Well, that was a life long ago." Okay, Mom, what does that mean? Well, his mother said that her father was a great man and a Mason, and he should actually call his grandmother and ask about it. Some time passed, and the son called his grandmother and asked about his grandfather that he never met. She said that she would send him what she had left of his belongings, and that if he wanted to know more, he'd have to ask. After a week or two, he received an envelope full of papers and a little book. Unsure with what to do, he went back to his father, explained what he received, and asked what he thought. Well, his father explained that he knew little of Masonry, but the only way to really know more is to actually go to the address from where these pamphlets and books came from. Why don't you go there, knock on the door, and ask someone there? Well, having no one else to question about it or knowing what he was doing, he drove to the address. The building was clean and white with just a few cars in the parking lot. And it seemed nice. As he walked up to the door, he almost turned around because people would ask, "Well, why are you here? You're interrupting what we're doing." But he knocked anyway. A man in a suit answered the door and asked him how he could help. And that Mason never forgot the man who opened that door for the very first time. So this was an individual's, not mine, just it's an anonymous person's journey toward Masonry. And it all began with finding a gavel like this. And so think of all of the steps he had to go through in order to find out more about the craft, to knock at the doors of our temples, and then actually gain admittance, right? Not even physical admittance, right? Not even to be a member. Another story. It continued with a hat. This is another story of a different master of a lodge who says, "The year I was master of my lodge, one of my stewards
John, we lost you.
not financially able to make the trip."
John?
Is audio dead? Is audio dead?
Yeah, could you just go back to the part about the master?
Okay, good. You can hear me? Good. So Master of the Lodge had one of his stewards come up to him and with a heavy heart said that his grandfather in Idaho was on his deathbed. And in fact, it was his grandfather, whose Masonic ring he was wearing. And the steward, unfortunately, was not financially able to make the trip. He had just started a job after being unemployed for a very long time and was just getting back on his feet. This person watched him during the initiation ceremony, and the master could tell that, just as well as everyone else in the room, that something was really heavily weighing on his heart. He went through his part, but when the stewards were dismissed to prepare refreshments, the master said, something's up with our steward. Why don't we have a brother in distress. Let's, and went on to tell kind of what the steward had shared with him about his grandfather. There wasn't a dry eye in the house, and then to which the master then removed his hat, placed it on the altar, and was taking up a free will collection to help out the steward. Right, the steward's out of the room at this time. Before the hat even hit the altar, the brethren already had all their wallets out, and one by one they gave what they could. He then had the junior deacon go get the steward and present him in the east. He explained to him that the wages of Masonry, what they were, and the importance of all the associations made, and gave him the collection that all the brethren had assembled and given. And out of the 20 or so more in attendance, they collected over $1,200. To which he broke down and cried tears of joy because he could see his grandfather and brother one last time, which is a memory that the master and the steward and all the brothers in attendance will never forget. So why do I mention these, right? What if these stories are lost? Right? What if this is why we do Masonry, right? We're here to help others. But as men, what is the legacy that we're leaving behind, right? When you think about, the titles that we get in Masonry, partly we get the titles because we want to have that legacy left behind. Oh, he was a past master, or he was a grand master, or anything else, right? But it is a masculine thing to think about the legacy you're going to leave behind, whether it's your children, whether it's something you create, something in your job, or for the members of the fraternity. What is our membership legacy that we're leaving behind? So let's see. So when we look at Masonic data, what we really want to do is think about what information is out there, like those stories, that we don't want lost. We don't want lost to time. We want to make sure that this information is archived, is recorded, it's preserved somewhere where that legacy can be found later. Especially if we know that Masonry as we know it, with no major changes, will be gone in 20 years. So, does this just disappear? Does this just go off into a faint whimper? Well, let's hope not. But I want to lay a framework out here so we can think through, what does Masonic information look like? So I'm going to use Masonic data. I'm going to use Masonic information. I'm going to use other types of terms. I'm going to use them interchangeably. But I want you to think through this diagram here, that data is just points in time, right? So there's no context to them at all. And so as we are collecting Masonic information, we have to think about where in the spectrum does this information lie. If you just have a data point, 7, it tells you nothing. I had someone ask, what, especially as an engineer, you could ask, so what's the answer? Well, the answer is 7, and we'll figure.
John, we lost you on the answer.
Test 1, 2, 3, 4.
There you are. Okay, so what's the answer, John?
42. Yes, always 42. Information is data in context. So this is where we actually know why this data exists. So if you step on a scale, if the number is hopefully like 160, then information is that's 160 pounds, and it's more or less than it was last week. And then you have knowledge. Knowledge is applied information. Okay, with that information, I can actually do something. I have a skill, I have ability, and hopefully mature into insight. Well, now, given my knowledge of how all these things fit together, I can find insights. Oh, this is related to that. And then hopefully you can see the last step, where wisdom is applied knowledge. Or wisdom is applied knowledge that has all the context with it. So that it can draw that optimal path. It can connect all those points together. And that's why when you look at the biblical references to wisdom, especially with King Solomon, right? We all know Solomon had, the story of cutting the baby in half and everything. Was he really going to do it? Of course not. But he had wisdom to know that in the context of what was going on with all the information and data and knowledge, he knew the right applied knowledge, the wisdom was to offer to cut the baby in half, and the mother would let the baby go, and the liar would say, sure, go ahead. So when you find Masonic information, it's going to be anywhere on the spectrum. You could have one data point. You could find a lapel pin, and that's without context of who made it, who's it for, what's it celebrating. You have just data on the left. Maybe it has the lodge name on it. Okay, that's a little bit more information. But then, it has the Masonic Con Chicago 2020. Well, now it's getting a little bit more into, now I know why and what the relationship is. So we're going to have a spectrum of Masonic information that we need to consider. We're really in the crawl and walk phase here when we talk about all the Masonic information that's out there that we want to leave a legacy behind for. Sometimes I've also seen this diagram with a sixth step beyond wisdom, and I thought it was apropos to include it in this presentation because after wisdom comes conspiracy theory. You connected all the points wrong. It's really the Bilderbergs, and so there you go. There's your applied wisdom is conspiracy. Let's not get to that end yet. There'll be plenty of time for conspiracies after 2040. All right. So now let's get to the interactive portion of the show. I may or may not be able to hear you, but I do want you to kind of talk amongst yourselves as you go through this, or even especially blow up the chat for all of you attending. I want you to look at some examples here, and I want you to think about what Masonic information could be captured that's really just kind of left on its own, that isn't captured anywhere else. So these are actual pictures taken from my my mother lodge, Herndon Lodge. And so the first question is, what kind of Masonic information do you see here? This is just outside on the porch, right outside the main entrance to the building. And you have a bench. You have the little letters on the letterboard that tells you where some of the information's faded in there, but it has dates and times. It has context. It has who to contact. Okay, now we've got some actual knowledge, not just information. I actually know all of these organizations meet here. I know that if I zoom in, I could probably read who that bench is dedicated to. Okay, where's it being captured anywhere else? We might have a website where all this is listed, but we know how Masonic websites are. Let's dive a little deeper into the lodge. Here is the infamous or famous wall of past masters. So this is an example of gentleman who's left a legacy, and yet if you were to pop quiz any of your attendees, then you get. So what did the guy? Even the easiest one. Where did the guy all the way in the upper right or upper left? The very first master. What was his mark? When was he master? What did he do for the lodge? How did he get the lodge started? There's so many stories to tell here that many of them, especially the ones with the black stripe, have been lost to time, and we'll never get that back. We'll never get some of that information back. Moving to another thing. So we have also our Eastern Star, similar, the matrons of the Eastern Star. They all have stories to tell. There's some awards and certificates left by
Awards, and then we lost you, John.
audio back.
You are back.
Okay.
We have awards, and then
nothing. So we don't want to lose this context either. Moving into the lodge library, our lodge has a small library. As a young entered apprentice, this is where I got excited to see all of these books that are here. And let me just add that if you're insuring your lodge, no matter which lodge you are, if you're insuring your lodge, you should be cataloging and recording this somewhere. Just like they tell you in your own house, try to go around, use your cell phone, take pictures of the serial numbers of your TVs and any appliances and any jewelry for insurance sake. Same thing is true for the lodge. I mean, look at all of this information that if there was a fire, if there was a flood, this could all be lost and like permanently lost. And so how do you know what's there? How do you know what's available? How does a new entered apprentice, fellow crafter, master mason know all the good knowledge that's right here in their library, right? Where's the catalog system, if there were, right? That's the logical extreme. Is this is all captured, cataloged, and yes, Greg even mentioned there's proceedings of grand lodges that are stuck in there as well. So you can go back a couple of years. On the right, in the upper right, and those red bound books are proceedings of Royal Arch. Grand Line books as well. So there's a whole variety of things. Looking around through the room, we got a couple of aprons in these shadow boxes. Why are these aprons framed? Why those in particular? Right? Who is that person on the right? Who are those people on the left? Why are they standing in their Masonic regalia? Whose past master certificate is that? Right? Whose emblem, whose name is on the emblem on the desk? Right? Just basic questions that, sure, the past masters who's been around for 100 years, they'll be able to answer it. But can you? That's the real thing, because they're not around forever. Moving towards the lodge room, we have our old shadow boxes and display cases. We've got members of Herndon Lodge right in the middle there who went to Gerald Ford's funeral. I don't know who these two guys are shaking hands. There's a lot of history there. So you can see the point that I'm getting to is that without context, this is just data, right? We don't have any information on what this really means. And then lastly, moving into the lodge room itself, this is kind of standing in the northwest corner, looking southeast. There's the master's station on the left-hand side of the picture. Right? What other information do you see? You see charters hanging on the walls, right? You see, most importantly, right there in the center, underneath that little jug of hand sanitizer, is the secretary's desk. There's some goodies in there, right? In some jurisdictions like Virginia, lodge minutes are secret, right? We don't share those publicly. But that doesn't mean that any member can't access those. Those are those members' minutes. Those should be available and easy to find and search and index, even if they're not being shared completely open on the internet. I will take this time to also go back and say that there's a member of Acacia Lodge, Jason Richards' lodge, that has been going through all of the handwritten minutes, the lodge minutes, since the late or early 1800s, and going through and digitizing them, like hand typing them from the cursive handwritten font on these pages that are falling apart, and then converting to Google Docs since 1877, Jason says, and converting them to a Google Doc that is shared to the members of the lodge. So they can see and search and be able to search for someone's name that they weren't able to do before. It's a labor of love, but the beauty of it, it's there, it's open, and it's shared, and it won't have to be done again. It's already been converted. And so, you have another copy. So now let's really get into what do we mean by Masonic data, Masonic information. I really like to simplify it, and it's really all Masonic information should fall in one of four categories. We have numbers, we have text, images, and video. Right? Everything that we consume as human beings really falls into one of these four categories. Numbers, you know me, I like membership numbers. Great, Ryan Ott is on top of it too. We have things like membership statistics, which I love.
You love membership statistics and something
Okay,
else.
am I back? 1, 2, 3.
You're back. Membership statistics.
And another one too that I know that Amity is a partner of this. I would if I were king for a day, that every lodge had check in on Amity so that attendance could be recorded, so you could actually see where members are going, where are the members attending lodge, even if they're not in their own mother lodge. Then you have text right over on the right. All those texts, like the capture of lodge minutes, Grand Lodge proceedings. Do you know where to find your Grand Lodge proceedings? What about educational papers? I heard Jason Richards gave a great presentation in his lodge and handed a copy to the secretary. Where is that? I don't know. That would be something that could easily be accessible to the members. Then we also have images. We have all of those past master photos. Who are they? Where are they cataloged? How about member photos? How about the charters themselves? Do we have a copy of an image copy of what that charter looks like? Yes, we need the official charter when we open and close lodge, but can we have a copy of that somewhere else in case the worst happens? And then just like I walked around the lodge room, can we have photos of lodge paraphernalia to remember that great Uncle Buck, was a member of this lodge, and he donated that Tyler sword, right? How do we know that? Because your legacy only lasts one generation after you, and then no one remembers you. And then finally, to prevent that from happening, video is really more accessible now. Anyone with their cell phone can start recording video. So how are we cataloging, organizing lectures, like more than just the paper, the actual presentation themselves? So thank you for hitting record on this presentation, Robert. What about family events? When you have big events, who's capturing video of all of the family and community that's there? But here's one that most people haven't thought of. That old past master in your lodge who knows everything, and I mean everything about that lodge. He knows, which company redid the floors 40 years ago. Interview them, but interview them on video, right? Set aside time, be socially distant, set up your camera on a tripod and hit record and just start saying, hey, tell us about the lodge. And you will see them just go on and on and on. And that video, their expressions, all that could be easily digitized and saved. It could be hosted on YouTube for free. So this is all within the realm of anyone's hands now. It doesn't have to be professional. And that's one of the big takeaways I want to have here, is that this does not have to be a professional organization that comes in. So as we go through, remember, we're trying to find where all of the data, all the numbers, text, images, and video, where does that fit in context of, is this just data? Do I have more information about it? What knowledge can I obtain from it? And what insights and wisdom can I actually apply that with, hopefully, preserving the fraternity growing our lodge, doing something with it, right? I've talked a lot about, applied data, like on TMR and others, where now we can start seeing how do we change and grow our lodge based off of the data, information, and knowledge that we have. But if we don't have data, information, or knowledge, we'll never get to wisdom. So, for example, in 2016, did a quick little data call, and I reached out to about 50 some odd Grand Lodges to try to get membership statistics. And I wanted to look behind the data other than just what was on Masonic Services Association of North America. So I just sent out a nice courteous email directly to all the Grand Secretaries and asked for, hey, I'm so-and-so, here's the project I'm working on. I know you have this information published. Is there a way that you could share with me just this information since the year 2000? If any of you are familiar or not familiar with Grand Lodge protocol, I almost committed, Harry Carey by reaching directly out to Masonic Grand Secretaries. If I were a regular person, a non-Mason, I would have probably got the data. But because I was a Mason from a different jurisdiction, asking for public published data. Now, I wasn't asking for anything secret. I was just asking for the courtesy to return back public published data, so I wouldn't have to go run and scramble around. I only had 3 kids at the time, so I was, much more time on my hands. Well, these were the Grand Lodges that wrote back and said, "No, you're broke protocol. Don't call us. We'll call you." Thanks, guys. I really do appreciate it. Yeah, I committed a faux pas. I think it's completely anachronistic. I think it's left over from another time. But we are in a digital fraternity that's dying. I wasn't asking for anything sensitive, but I was able to do a mea culpa. I went through our Grand Secretary and Grand Master and actually did follow up with protocol. So, okay, sure, we'll have it go through the official channels. We'll have our Grand Master reach out and actually ask for this data.
John, we lost you on, you asked the Grandmasters.
Grand Lodges actually returned the phone call after protocol, after following Masonic protocol. How many Grand Lodges did follow up? How many do you think? Some of you are good guessers. Yeah.
6 is the number we got.
Okay, so I've heard 20 in the chat, 0, 1. Yes, I have one whole Grand Lodge who responded after the official letter came out from the Grand Master. So what was the benefit of protocol then? For something that's, again, not sensitive and out there, I just found it to be very much a slap in the face. So what do I do with this? I pull up my bootstraps and say, that's not going to work. That I can't, any one Mason can't go and do this. So here are some that did respond in good favor, but I had to go make a little trip down to the George Washington Masonic Memorial. Fortunately, I only live about 45 minutes away from the George Washington Masonic Memorial. They have a huge library, and they actually have a copy of most Grand Lodge proceedings since some of them were even founded. And so through working with the librarian, Mark Tabbert, great guy, was able to help us dig through this. I know it was a couple weekends. I know Jason Richards helped me one weekend, and we just had a Google sheet open, and we were just saying, okay, let's pick a state. And we just went and picked the states since 2000. And year by year, opened up the Grand Lodge proceeding, skimmed and skimmed and skimmed and skimmed to find the actual membership numbers that we were looking for. Wrote those down, closed that book, went back to the shelf, and
John, we lost your audio on that last slide.
And then there were more states I just didn't get a chance to get to. You can see this is the problem. Thank you, Greg. Is that the problem is this is such a distributed, closed network. And this is important for my data and IT folks, is that if distributed networks are great when they're all communicating, it's this thing called the internet that we all use. If you have distributed networks that aren't communicating, you have 50 silos of data. You have 50 closed databases. This is a problem. This is a huge problem. And it was only successful because I live within 45 minutes of this building, right? Maybe your Grand Lodge has some of its own, but definitely not other Grand Lodges to this extent. So the point of the story is that the manual research that's required for any one Mason, not just myself, for any one Mason is not scalable. It is not something we can do just to get the data and information. Remember, the goal is to get to wisdom, but just to get the data and information, this is not scalable at all. So what are our options? Like, how are we gonna dig ourselves out of this? Well, there's a popular change management book that I've read in the past. It's called Switch: How to Change Things When Change is Hard. And one of the techniques they talk about, this is about change management, how do organizations get everyone on board when they're used to the old thing and they were trying to switch to new things. One story in here is about the malnutrition in Vietnam. And what they found is that there was a lot of kids that were not getting well nourished, especially in poorer areas. And so the result here is that they were looking for is, let's go look for the bright spots. Let's go look for where it's going well organically, where it is actually being accomplished without a lot of intervention. It serves two purposes. It helps people find what's working and keep doing it, but also it's not some external consultant coming in telling you how to do your job. This is already happening internally well. What did they find? When the actual nutrition experts were looking for bright spots, they found some pockets of the villages actually had very healthy and sometimes over the average weight children. And they said, well why are you, what are you doing? Let me see what you're doing when you're feeding your kid, what they're eating. And comes to find out that most of the malnourished Vietnamese children were only eating a diet that was primarily rice. Just rice, maybe a couple of vegetables in it. But the kids that were healthy or healthier, had more weight to them and more protein, they were actually eating. Their parents left the prawns, the crustaceans, inside of the cooked meal. So they were getting rice, vegetables, and protein and good cholesterol from these prawns. And so prawns at the time were just kind of like trash food, but yet those parents who let the kids eat the prawns were actually enabling their nutrition. And it was a bright spot that all the other parents had to do was just include prawns in the meal, and then nutrition went up. Same thing is true for our fraternity. There are bright spots of who's collecting good data, how it's being organized, but it's one of these things that we have to look for what's working and then repeat that organically. We can't just wholeheartedly cut over and make everybody on a Grand Lodge database overnight. Right? If I were king for a day, sure, perfect world, everyone would use the same database. All the data would be one place. We could slice it, dice it, and run all sorts of reports on it, and that would be great. But we can't. That's not feasible right now. So my call to action for you guys is start digitizing right now. What I mean right now, I'm like, get out your phones, start taking pictures, start taking videos. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, it's better that it's not, because it can always be cleaned up later. But we don't. if we don't have any data, we can never get to wisdom. So if the data is lost, it's lost. Here's an example. So here's I talked about the whole wall of past masters at Herndon Lodge. Let's see if this link works. Let's see if I'm sharing my screen. Let me share my whole desktop here. Share the screen. So yeah, so here, these are all online and cataloged by their name, their year, and you can actually see a lot more detail about the masters themselves. So that's always instantly accessible, a link away. So that's one data point, is something that simple. The story behind this, and it's something that you should look for opportunities as well. When they were rearranging with past masters, they had to take all the old photos off the wall. And a couple of smart brothers said, hey, while we've got them down off the wall, what if we just took them out of their frames and started scanning them? That's a great idea. Next thing you know, within a day or two, we had a whole assembly line of, one brother would take it off the wall, another brother would take it out of the frame, and the third brother would put it on a flatbed scanner, the fourth one would run the computer, and the fifth one would reassemble the frame and put it right back up. We knocked this out in an hour or two because we had two or three parallel computers going at the same time. So it was not hard to do. It took a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, but it was easy to do, to digitize the memory and legacy of these past masters. Also, just announced a couple of weeks ago was the Masonic Digital Archive.
John just announced a few weeks ago the Masonic Digital Archives. That's where we lost you.
Scan your Grand Lodge proceedings. So if you have a hard time, we're back. Masonic Digital Arc. I'm back. Am I good? Okay. I'm going to assume I'm good. For a small fee, okay, you can actually have Mark Tabbert and his associates destroy one of your old Grand Lodge proceedings to scan them in, make sure it's all OCR'd, and then host it up on George Washington Masonic National Memorial's website, so that some guy like me doesn't have to drive down to the memorial to dig through and find, say, membership numbers. It's all there. You could do it in your pajamas, and it's really helping preserve something like that. I mean, he's focused right now on, as you see, Grand Lodges, Royal Arch chapters, cryptic councils, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a start, and it's a start in the right direction, and it's a service that's available. And then another one that's in the same vein is Masonic genealogy. So for those who know Brother Walter Hunt out in Massachusetts, he's doing a great job, another labor of love, by having basically a Wikipedia site that's completely editable, that you can actually go through and look at people and lodges. You can actually see specific information, all sorted, all cataloged. And the beauty about this is, you could just get an account and start adding to it. Right? It's not anything secret. It's there. It's public. It's accessible. Clicks away. But again, another effort that if we all got on the same page, we all started sharing our data, then we really can make a difference. So as I start to round things up here, I also want to encourage you to right now reach into your pocket and get out your phones. Or if you're watching virtually, open a new web browser, a new tab. And the reason is that I just a totally random click, Marty. That what I want you to do is to go in your web browsers, web browser on your phone, or go to web browser, new tab, and go to datadrivenmasonry.com. A few of us, Jason Richards, Nick Harvey, and myself, have just started, like, we need to just start somewhere. Take the first step and actually go to www.datadrivenmasonry.com, and you'll see like kind of a blank page of everything I just talked about, that we want to start to organize data. We want to crowdsource it. You remember that issue we had with protocol, where one guy calling other jurisdictions was a big no-no? This is where you can help. If you're from another jurisdiction and the data is okay to share, then it's much easier as a Mason in that jurisdiction to ask their Grand Secretary for information than for me to ask them, or for anyone else outside of that jurisdiction to ask. This is one step to get all the data in one place, open it up, crowdsource it, give it away, right? We're not making money on this. Who would want this data anyway? We're just trying to turn this data into knowledge so that we can apply wisdom later and understand that. And if you see down the bottom of that, right here on the screen, there's a big blue button, join the discussion now. We have a Facebook group that's open that anyone can come in, start kicking around ideas. Hey, what about this data? What about that data? I have this, I can share that. We'd love to have ambassadors that, we can go to, say Jason Richards is the guy for DC. So he will be the guy who will do the legwork to get that information from the DC Grand Lodge, because he's a member of that jurisdiction. And so this is the best way that we can work together for this labor of love, so that we can actually start sharing and applying that knowledge and wisdom to get to a better knowledge of where we're going for the craft. So, in summary, start right now. What I mean right now, I mean, if you're at the conference today, physically in person, take plenty of pictures, right? Share those pictures. Get an online web album where you can dump all these things. Start telling everyone, sharing that data. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? I do want to stress that. Start digitizing with what you have. Outsource what you can't. Just like Mark Tabbert can scan those things for you. If you can't find a good app on your phone that can do OCR, object character recognition, that's fine. Get someone else to do it. Go on Fiverr and find someone. But it's better to start than to wait and hope for someone else to do it, because we only have 19 and a half years. And we'd love for you to join the conversation with us, not me, with us, at www.datadrivenmasonry.com, and go join that Facebook group so we can actually start sharing data and making sure that our legacy lives on forever. With that, I'll end the presentation, open it up for some questions, and then let you guys have a great dinner.
Well, thank you so much, John. I think give him a round of applause here. All right, John. Yeah, can you make your screen like the big one? We just want to see a big floating head. That's what I want to see.
Let's see what I can do here.
Yeah, can you do that?
Let's see. Wait.
Anyway, I like what you said at the end there, this idea, almost like comparative advantage theory in economics, right? Do what you do what you know best, and outsource the rest. So fantastic advice. We have Q&A open. I don't have anything here on the digital side, but I wanted to ask anybody in the audience if you have questions. Looks like Kurt Cedarholm's got a question for you back there. Sure. Kurt, you want to come up here and ask John? One second, John.
John, what's the extinction event that we're all going to die by 2040?
It's a singularity, actually.
2040.
Yeah. Yeah, you've been reading. So Philip K. Dick has the singularity effect, right? Where part of my tinfoil hat says that by 2040, not only will Masonry die, but we'll have other events as well. So I think, that's when the Grand Lodge gives Order 66. Nice, Jason. But I do believe that there are other things. Social Security runs out in 2034. We have other events that start to all line up around that date. So I'm not saying it was aliens, but it's aliens.
Don, I have a question.
Go ahead, Robert.
How about a digital lodge archivist toolkit, which lays out priorities and best practices, something to hand to the next gung-ho, freshly minted Master Mason? Does such a toolkit exist? If not, can someone, maybe John Ruark, please make that?
No, that's a great idea. Thank you, Marty, for suggesting that. Because it's not hard. It's just, it does need a little bit of like, where am I going to put this stuff and how am I going to share it? So, which formats am I going to do this in? Am I going to scan an image, right? Or am I going to try to scan the text out of the image? Because having a copy of the PDF is great, or having a JPEG picture of text is okay, but getting that text converted into actual editable text is even better. So that those are kind of those examples that a lot of people who are doing knowledge capture, knowledge information work would it comes naturally to them. But I could see where if you're just handing a piece of paper to someone and say, "All right, brother, you're part of the lodge history committee, and tag, you're responsible for digitizing all the lodge records." Yeah, it would be a good place to start. So I hope Marty asks that question in the Facebook group for data-driven masonry, so that way we can start that discussion as well, and we could actually start throwing one together, because that's that is something that you could just throw a Google Doc together and knock that out in a weekend, and now you have a shared document that everyone could just start handing out to their brothers. Robert,
One last question. We have, do you think Grand Lodges will start consolidating at some point?
By consolidating their data, I'll say no, but I know what you mean by that. That the structure of the fraternity is not sustainable as it is all the way through 2040. And so within the next 20 years, if I had to predict, you'll have your smaller Grand Lodges that within the next 10 years will either have to fold entirely or be kind of like the Grand Lodge of England has other sub Grand Lodges under them. So I'm thinking like Utah, for example, they only have about 2,000 or 3,000 members in the entire state. That's not sustainable from an administrative top-down structure. And so, yeah, absolutely, they'll have to start consolidating administrative work at some point. And I think those will be the first couple cracks, the fissures in the consolidation of Freemasonry by then.
We have one question here, I think, from Gary Meisner, real quick. John, do you have any plans to do any additional surveys anytime soon?
I was looking over that data again. It's been, thank you for mentioning that, Gary. It's time to do another one. Ever since I did the first one back in 2016, so it's been 4 years ago, I wanted people to respond, and so I was overly protective of the data. I was like saying, no one else is going to see this data except for me, so you feel free to be honest. And I asked some questions like, what's your sexual preference? I asked, what some of these, like, well, how much money did you make? Because I wanted to see if there were any correlations between affluence or anything like that, or more especially the responses of the data that was not just numerical, the actual data that was answering hard questions. And so I protected it too much so people would share. And I think it's time, once this data-driven masonry thing gets some legs, that if we run this again, it's probably time to do another one, given that there's only 19 and a half years left in masonry. We should open it up. And what I would love to see is that many of the same questions, I have some lessons learned from the last one, things I would ask differently, or new questions I would ask, and actually make that data 100% searchable and accessible. So I'd have to be careful about people's names and PII and that kind of stuff. very careful about data aggregation. But man, could you imagine if we all had raw access to that data, so where you could slice the data and you could see that, the people who were in a Prince Hall Grand Lodge and they lived 10 miles away from their lodge, and that lodge had education once a month. They're the most active Masons in the country. Well, great. Those are the bright spots I was just talking about earlier. That's where you can say, what is good that we can repeat? Let's not be doom and gloom about 2040. Let's be inspired by that and say, what is working, and copy that. That's the goal. So to directly answer your question, yeah, it's time. It's time to do another one of those. But this time it's going to be wide open for everyone to have raw access to the data. Daniel Valdez, while we're starting to wrap things up, I know we're a little over time. Daniel Valdez says, well, technology is going to change because pretty soon that we won't be able to read that text file or that image file or that video file. That is everyone's digital problem right now. But the good news is we can always convert it. So as long as we're active and engaged, we can always convert it to new formats as time progresses. And I'll stop there. Have any other questions? The easiest way, just hop on that datadrivenmasonry.com, click to that Facebook group, and then ask any other questions there. I'd love to have you there. I'd love to have your help.
Thank you so much, John. Another round of applause for John. John, so you can see your audience here that's live. We know we're all socially distant, but I'm just dropping everything.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, man. I'll talk to you later. Love you, buddy.
All right. Thanks a lot.